He sat alone at the corner of a diner, an old veteran with worn boots, faded patches, and eyes that had seen too much. Most people passed him by without a glance, but three young men didn't just stare. They laughed. They mocked his limp, his tattered jacket, and the color of his skin. No one spoke up. No one helped. But moments later, the sound of dozens of engines filled the air. 40 bikers rolling in, their faces set with purpose. What they did next would silence the laughter and remind everyone what true respect looks like. It was a quiet afternoon in a small southern town, one of those places where everyone seemed to know everyone, but not everyone was treated the same. James Walker, a 68-year-old war veteran, had lived there his entire life. His morning started early, polishing his old motorcycle and sipping coffee from a chipped mug that read, U.S. Army, Never Forgotten. He didn't have much, but he had his pride, and his memories of serving a country that hadn't always served him back. Every Friday, James rode down to the local diner, a humble spot where the smell of bacon and coffee lingered in the air. Most folks greeted him politely, but behind the smiles were whispers. To some, he was just an old black man who talked too much about the past. Yet to others, he was a quiet reminder of sacrifice and dignity. That afternoon, as he parked his bike and limped inside, a group of young men snickered from the corner booth. He ignored them at first, trying to enjoy his meal in peace, but the tension in the room was thick, like the calm before a storm. James didn't know it yet, but this day, this ordinary lunch, would soon test everything he believed about respect, courage, and brotherhood. James kept his eyes on his plate, pretending not to notice the laughter echoing from the next booth. The three young men, locals, maybe in their 20s, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Their voices carried a cruel kind of amusement, the kind born not from humor, but from hate. Didn't know they let his kind sit here, one muttered. Another laughed, mimicking James's limp as he walked to refill his coffee. A few customers looked away, uncomfortable but silent. The waitress hesitated, then turned her back. James had faced worse, on foreign soil under real fire, but somehow this small-town cruelty cut deeper. He tried to stay calm. He'd learned long ago that silence often said more than words ever could. But when one of the men reached over and tugged the faded army patch from his jacket, waving it like a trophy, something inside James shifted. The diner went still. Forks stopped midair. James slowly turned, eyes steady, voice low. "That patch," he said, "cost more than you'll ever understand." The men laughed again. One called him a liar. Another said he probably found it in the trash. Their mockery grew louder, sharper, feeding off each other's ignorance. James stood to leave, but as he reached for his helmet, one of them shoved him from behind. His cane clattered to the floor. Gasps rippled through the room, but no one moved. No one helped. Outside, James stumbled toward his motorcycle, anger and humiliation burning through him. He didn't want revenge, he just wanted to go home. But as he reached the parking lot, he heard it, the unmistakable roar of engines in the distance. Dozens of them, deep, thunderous, and growing louder by the second. The bullies turned, confused. Then the first biker appeared. Black leather vest, steel stare. Another followed, then another. Within moments, the diner parking lot was filled with nearly 40 bikers, engines idling in unison. James froze. He recognized the emblem on their jackets. It was from the Brothers in Arms Club, a group of veterans who rode to honor fallen soldiers. They'd seen everything. The lead rider dismounted, walking slowly toward the group of men who had mocked James. He didn't have to say a word. The bullies' faces drained of color as the air grew thick with the rumble of power and loyalty. What happened next would turn that quiet town upside down and make sure no one ever disrespected that old veteran again. The parking lot vibrated with the deep growl of 40 motorcycles. Dust swirled through the air as every engine idled in sync, their sound alone commanding silence. The bullies stood frozen, faces pale, mouths half open, while James steadied himself beside his bike, still clutching his helmet. The lead biker stepped forward, his presence calm but heavy with authority. He wasn't a giant, but he carried the weight of someone who had seen things most men couldn't imagine. His eyes flicked from James to the three young men who had mocked him. "You think mocking a veteran makes you tough?" he asked quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, sharp and cold. The bullies didn't answer. They didn't dare. One of the bikers bent down, picked up James's cane, and handed it back to him like it was a sacred medal. "He's our brother," the man said. "You just disrespected every soldier who's ever fought for this country." The words hit harder than any punch. The crowd that had gathered outside the diner, customers, passers-by, even the waitress, watched in stunned silence. The bullies tried to laugh it off, but their voices trembled. One muttered an apology, another turned to leave. But the lead biker blocked his way. "No," he said, stepping closer. "You're going to say it to him." The tallest of the three swallowed hard, turned toward James, and muttered a shaky apology. James said nothing. He simply nodded, his gaze steady, his pride restored not by anger, but by the respect of those who truly understood what he'd endured. Then, one by one, the bikers shut off their engines. The rumble faded into silence. James looked around, at the faces, the fear, the respect, and felt something shift in the air. That day, the world didn't just see an old man. They saw a soldier, a survivor, a symbol. And for the first time in a long time, James knew he wasn't standing alone anymore. When the dust finally settled, the three young men walked away, heads down, shame written across their faces. The bikers didn't chase them, didn't threaten them. They didn't need to. Their unity, their quiet strength, spoke louder than any words or fists ever could. James stood there gripping his cane, surrounded by men who understood him in ways few ever could. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as a burden, not as a target, but as a brother. Later that evening, the story spread through town. Someone had filmed it on their phone. 40 bikers standing up for a black veteran who'd been mocked for his service and his skin. By nightfall, the video had gone viral. Comments poured in from veterans, activists, and ordinary people who said they cried watching it. The same community that had once turned its back on James began to greet him with respect. But for James, it wasn't about revenge or attention. It was about something deeper, about proving that decency still existed, that silence could be broken, and that no man who wore the uniform deserved to be treated as less than human. Weeks later, James returned to that diner, not alone this time, but riding alongside the very bikers who had defended him. The laughter that once mocked him was replaced with nods of respect. And though the scars of that day would never fully fade, something powerful had changed. Not just in that town, but in the hearts of those who watched. Because this wasn't just James's story. It was a reminder of how easily dignity can be stolen, and how powerful it is when we choose to stand together instead of looking away. So the question remains, when we witness injustice next time, will we stay silent, or will we stand up too? If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Stories like James's remind us that silence helps the wrong side win, and that courage starts with one person choosing to act. If you believe respect and humanity should never depend on race, color, or background, share this video so more people can hear his story. Leave a comment with your thoughts below. Because your voice matters more than you think. And if you want to see more real, powerful stories about standing up for what's right, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. Together, we can make sure these stories are never forgotten.